First, it is important to remember that everyone is entitled to legal representation, and that should not impugn his or her innocence. Now, John Ramsey is 100% innocent. An intruder entered his house while they were at the Whites for Christmas dinner, and when they went home and went to bed, the intruder struck and killed JonBenet in the basement and then left out the basement window. And it wasn't John's idea to hire an attorney. The idea came about from his friends and family. They encouraged and told him to hire an attorney the next day. After the tragedy, we were being told by friends and family, and a close friend of mine, who's also a practicing attorney, took me aside and said, "John, I think there are some things developing here that I would like to ask your permission to do. Some things that I think are necessary to be done." And I said, "Fine, do it." And so he retained counsel for Patsy and I. And so to not have knowledgeable counsel, my close friends thought would be foolish. It's obvious that the intruder entered through the broken basement window, as John had done previously during the summer, because all the first floor doors were locked. Yeah, when I went down and looked around the house that morning, and I think I made a statement, or at least I read, I know I said this, that all the doors were locked and I had checked. I believe every door on the first floor, and they appeared to be locked. So the morning of the 26th, do you recall checking all the doors and they were locked? I believe I checked all the first floor doors, yeah. I did go out once. I went out the door that leads into the garage to see if it was locked, because there's a bunch of boxes piled in front of it, and you couldn't get to it from the inside of the garage. So I did in fact go out of the house once, which would have been for, half a minute. And actually, I'd gone down there earlier that morning into that room, and the window was broken, but I didn't see any glass around, so I assumed it was broken last summer. I used that window to get into the house when I didn't have a key, but the window was open about 1/8 of an inch and just kind of latched it. So I went back down with Fleet, and we looked around for some glass again. Still didn't see any glass, and I told him that I thought that the break came from when I did that last summer, and then I went from there into the cellar. The death of innocence. We head downstairs, and I take Fleet over to the broken window pane and explain my breaking in there last summer. I tell him that I had found the window open earlier. We look for glass splinters, and we find some small ones. So the fact is, the window was open just a little bit, and there were glass splinters around the area. So obviously, an intruder had entered through that basement window that night. Now it's clear that an intruder assaulted JonBenet that night, because there was blood found on her body, and there were abrasions in her private area. However, from the autopsy report, this section, you could not determine if that was prior sexual abuse or it was just something that happened that night. And so, with that, it's obvious that an intruder did this horrendous act. Now, there was this small section in the autopsy report that mentioned chronic inflammation, epithelial erosion with underlying capillary congestion, and on the eroded surface. But that part of the autopsy isn't clear. So if there was prior sexual abuse, it could have been done by the intruder, and that's why he acted out that night. That's why he came back to assault JonBenet that Christmas night. Now, as to the bowl of pineapple on the table, that was obviously put there prior to the Ramseys going over to the Whites that night, or maybe when they returned home, Burke had got that out and John Ramsey wasn't aware of that. And that's why the bowl of pineapple and that glass with the tea bag in it is there. And furthermore, it doesn't say anything in the autopsy report about pineapple being in JonBenet's system. It says the proximal portion of the small intestine contains fragmented pieces of yellow to light green tan apparent vegetable or fruit material, which may represent fragments of pineapple. May. He wasn't sure. It may be fragments of pineapple. The pathologist wasn't 100% sure. The ransom note was obviously written by some employee of Access Graphics. They knew that John's work bonus was around that $118,000 amount. They knew that John had moved from Atlanta in the South to Boulder, and they definitely had an interest or favorability to movies. For example, if we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Don't try to grow a brain, John. All of these statements in the ransom note show that the killer of JonBenet was a big fan of movies. Well, what I've been told is that, and I felt tremendous guilt after we lost JonBenet because I hadn't protected her, like I failed as a parent, and was told that with that kind of emotion, you shouldn't take a lie detector test because you did have the guilt feeling, so I don't know about the test. But I did not kill my daughter, if that's what you want to ask me. She was the most precious thing to me in the world. So if the lie detector test is correct, and it was done correct, I'd pass it 100%. Well, this ends this episode of Unsolved, and I just wanted to make you aware that on October 30th, I will be doing a special investigation on the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside in 1966. And I know Riverside in that area, and I'll bring a lot of information about that case. So I'll see you the next weekend, for another episode of Unsolved.